Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Coarse podcast. This is episode number 8. And as most people do, most people have a lucky number. And in this case, it's not my lucky number, but it's tonight's guest's lucky number. Tonight's guest, I don't know quite where to begin. So I suppose I should start with a small incidental fire in the Scranton Commons at Bloomsburg University involving a bagel, a toaster, and perhaps some poor timing. Fast forward over the course of the next 10 or so years, and she's laughing during the intro, so you know this is going lots of places quick. Fast forward over 10 years later, wouldn't you know it that this person, this guest, just happens to have 3 beautiful sons and a dashing, debonair husband who just happens to host an amazing podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, because her lucky number is 8, she made me promise this, and I couldn't be happier to have she whose lucky number is 8 with me again tonight. It's the only guest on this podcast I've ever had the chance to sleep with. Sorry, Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife, Greta Rosler. How are you, dear?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the couch you're in our office.
Yeah, so tonight is the most free-form, laid-back, awesome version of the Coarse Grind podcast that we've ever had. But I think it should be noted, and we'll certainly discuss this over the course of the interview, that my wife has undergone an amazing, astounding culinary transformation that stems from many different angles. And this is really, when I created the show, what I wanted to get into. Not just, chefs who are slinging plates, covering covers on a nightly basis, but people who just love food for the love of food like myself. And wouldn't you know it, I just happen to marry this wonderful, wonderful woman. So, again, dear, welcome. I think this might be awkward from time to time, but in a cute fashion. So,
okay.
We're going to break the interview up into 3 different sections: starters, mains, afters. Starters, where you came from, what you're about, what food was to you growing up. Mains, where you are now, how you view food, how you view trends in food. And finally, the afters, they're going to be a little different questions, more out of the box than anything else. Really kind of focus on some left brain thought as it pertains to food. So, Greta Rosler, formerly Greta Keller, let's talk about where and how you grew up eating. Where was it that you grew up, and what was it you grew up eating?
Well, I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I grew up eating, I would not call it anything extraordinary. My mom, as you know, Sean, is a phenomenal cook. And I grew up eating her food, which really gave me a subconscious love for things that are very well seasoned and taste very good. She has an innate ability to cook things that are savory and salty and perfectly done. And it might be something simple, but she gets all the elements just right. And I grew up eating things like that. And then from a family perspective, I grew up with my grandmother eating like her home cooking, like Lancaster County chicken pot pie. And I know we will debate that. Lancaster County, homemade bread, all that really good food that I grew up with her eating there. But you would think that because I grew up like in the Lehigh Valley and in the Lancaster County region, I spent a lot of time, you would think that I have a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch influence. And while there are certain elements in the food we ate, it was more just about my mom knowing what food to put together. More than anything, she knows how to combine ingredients and what type of thing goes with what, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And, again, having the personal knowledge that I do of the players in this game, I can only nod my head and salivate in agreement. When I think of Nance, when I think of your grandma, I think of the chocolate chip cookies are a softball, but the eggplant in the cast iron, in the Crisco, is just, that's that soul. That's that soul you can't get anywhere else, I don't think. I think you have to grow up with it or marry into it, which, I was fortunate enough to do. So when you were a little a young child growing up in this scenario, what kind of an eater were you? Were you picky? Were you not?
I do not believe I was picky. I had a few dislikes, but I think my mom and my grandmother would tell you that I ate most things. Although the one thing I was picky about, which is a staple for most children, is I did not like peanut butter at all. Like, never wanted to eat peanut butter until I got to be in my late teens, and I kind of then started eating it a little bit. But again, I would only eat it in a savory way. Like, I still to this day can't eat peanut butter and jelly. But so I wasn't picky, but there were things like that that I definitely called out and didn't want anything to do with. Similarly, my mom will tell you I didn't want any kind of tomatoes, which is odd because I love tomatoes today. And there wasn't really a whole lot I didn't like. My mom made us all kinds of different stuff, and I'm not saying like we had, um, Thai food or anything like that, but she made a really good variety of stuff, and we just ate it. I remember eating. She would make liver, and I would eat it, and I would love it. And speaking of that, my grandma would make chicken hearts. Oh my gosh, and we thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So I guess that answers the question. No, I was not picky.
Except when it came to the man you married, but that's a whole other story for another time.
Well, right, of course, absolutely.
Right. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Got it. So, when you think back to that point in time, and again, I think the awkward but cool part of this interview is that I know the answers here, but I think it's so cool for people to hear, because a lot of folks, who have come over, who have eaten like our food. So I think it's so cool to hear where it actually came from. And so when you think back to Lancaster, when you think back to those summers and that kind of thing, what childhood foods, like if you had to name one or a handful, what childhood foods do you miss the most? Which ones make your heart just hurt?
The one childhood food that makes my heart hurt is the eggs my grandmother would make for me. And some of that is just pure sentimental nostalgia for being with her. But she would make eggs. I guess we called them dippy eggs. I guess they're eggs over easy, I guess is what they're called. Right? I don't know.
Yep, depending on the texture of the yolk.
And, well, they would be like runny. Like you could dip toast
so that's
in
over
it.
easy. Yep.
And they would be perfectly done because the very edge, like outer perimeter of the eggs, would be very crispy and slightly browned. And she would have salt and pepper all over it. And the whole entire yolk was the perfect texture to dip a really good piece of buttered homemade bread in. And that is a food that just makes me, like I always say to you, since I've gotten older and had some problems with food intolerances, when I get to heaven, I'm going to eat those dippy eggs with her. Like, oh, I just can't wait for that. But another food that makes my heart warm and that I think about is when my mom would make chicken wings. She would just take the little wings you buy in the store, and she would just broil them with salt and pepper on them. And she, didn't sauce them, didn't put anything on them. They were just broiled, crispy, and lots of salt and pepper. And that is something I think about, and I remember her making and being hungry for it, and I couldn't wait till she would make it. And sometimes one of the things she would make, and I don't know that she ever made these things together, but she would take potato skins, just the skin, and she would fry it. And Wow. If you've never had that, that is something to try because it is so good. She would fry it and she would salt it. Here's the theme of my life, salt. Hence why I can never get my rings off. And she would salt it and they would be hot and she'd put them on a paper towel, like lined plate. And oh, they were fabulous. Fabulous. Those are just a couple.
Yeah.
You want more
That's
than that?
awesome. And again, no. That's plenty because you're gonna get me hungry, and we're gonna have to go meet in the kitchen, all 5 steps away from each other that we are right now, and make some of this shit. Um, yeah, and that's always been the theme that I've gotten. But just especially when we used to go up and visit your grandmother, there's just a love behind those dippy eggs, behind those things, and it just transcends. And I really think, and this is not to be corny, hokey, bullshit husband-wife podcast. Oh, look, they planned it. No, this is really last minute. I swear to Christ. But I think that's why Like Souls go for Like Souls, because that's the level of appreciation of food that just it astounds me when I found you burning a bagel. Or when I found you making pumpkin soup in our apartment. That's a story we're going to tell here in a minute. I'm holding you to that. The fact that we are where we are and we call upon those memories that we do, like that's the love of what we put in our bodies that I think a lot of people miss. And I hope that if people pick this cast up and they hear it, they think about food a little differently. So when you were a little girl with your little snarky little smirk that you had in most of your pictures, and again, only guess that I can attest to that. Who was your greatest culinary influence? Now this is going to be tough. This is going to be like Bloods and Crips calling this one. Who was your greatest culinary influence?
Who is it now, or what do you mean?
Who was it coming up? Okay, you know what? Two-parter. Who was it and who is it now?
You mean like when I was little? Who did I think,
Yeah.
I want to... Well, when I was little, I thought that what my grandma made was like the be-all, end-all of the whole world. And some of what she made was, you've probably heard me say, she would buy these frozen honey buns, and I thought like there was nothing better in the whole world than that thing. And I thought that really it was about her and the way she made them, when really she got them out of the freezer and put them in I think she actually put them in the oven for me. I don't know. But I remember thinking, like, how does everything she makes taste this good? Well, part of it is because everything she made had half a pound of butter in it. But I just remember thinking her vegetable soup, her bread, her chocolate chip cookies, her chicken pot pie. Those were the things like she would always make for us. And I remember she would put out like a tray of, not a tray, but I remember being there sometimes for this like ladies' luncheon thing that she would have. And she would lay out this tray of lunch meat. And I remember being like, how does she do that so well? But part of it was the elegance of the way she would do this stuff. She had this, excuse me, she had this gorgeous china that my sister could attest to was really beautiful. And she used it all the time. And I don't even know if you'd call it china. I don't know what it was. She had these gorgeous dishes. And her table always looked so pretty. And she used, she just had nice finishes on the table that made it pretty. So some of the memories and recollection I have of it that built, how I think I want to cook and be, was really about the environment that she made with the food, and not even the food itself. Some of the food, I mean, the food was great, but that was where I really remember thinking, wow, I want to set a table like this, and I want my food to just meld into the table as beautifully as hers did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was the answer as to who was your greatest culinary influence. Who is now?
Who is now? See, I'm so glad. Well, I'm glad in a way I didn't have time to prepare for this interview, because mentally I was thinking it was not going to happen tonight. But then now I didn't give this any thought. So I'm trying to think, who is my greatest culinary influence now? Um, One of them is uh, Michael Chiarella. I really, really love his style. I love the flavors he puts together. Um, Another one would definitely be Ina Garten. Definitely, she's a big one for me. And I think also still my mom today, because she's still, as she's evolved into her place as a cook over her 60 some years, she now puts flavors together that I know she wouldn't have done 30, 40 years ago, maybe. Not that I was around 40 years ago, let me just say that, but she puts flavors together now that are very bold, sometimes even too bold for me. And I always think it's impressive that she continues to like sort of push it with stuff that's really fresh and kind of trendy in terms of what flavors go with what. But yeah, I would definitely say my mom, Michael Chiarella, Ina Garten. I'm trying to think. What do you think, Sean? Who am I missing that I reference and talk about and love?
Oh, it's not my interview, babe. It's not my interview.
I can't really think of. I'm trying to think of somebody like on Top Chef who I'm like, oh my gosh, I love their food. I can't really think of anybody in particular because I feel like I take little pieces from every chef I've watched or every cook I know. I will definitely say I'm going to give mad props here to Gary Vatican, our Bloomsburg Main Street, restaurateur and idol, because he definitely inspires me in a big way when I see again the ambiance and environment of his restaurant, and I taste the flavors he has put together, some of which are a little bit edgy to put together and some which are classic. And then when you bring those two things together, it's like, wow, holy shit, this mushrooms and whatever we had the other night there, mushrooms and garlic and what was it, olives. I was like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
definitely say
It was
Gary
basically
Vatican is a, what's that?
no. It was I forget what it was with the mushrooms, but it was things that and I'm not typically the mushroom guy, but Jesus, put it on a plate from his hand, and I'm sold.
Yeah, Gary Vatican, I would say locally is definitely someone who inspires me in a big way.
Hmm. Cool, cool. So, we talked about where you drew your inspiration from, who it was that, influenced you culinarily. When was the moment that you realized that food was something more than just satiety, that it was something more than just something you had to put in your body to live? Was there a moment that you looked at food as exquisite as art, and if so, when?
Um, hmm. Well, I think one of the periods in my life when I started realizing that I actually have something to do with food is, as you have mentioned, the era of the pumpkin soup.
Jesus.
um,
Now, fess up,
I,
fess up.
I,
Tell the story of the pumpkin soup.
okay, so we were newly coupled, to use a British term, and we had just begun living together, I would say within a 6 month period of time, and we were living in our apartment in Danville, Pennsylvania. And I had gotten this free recipe book. I don't remember, where did I get it. I don't know. I did not yet know how to
It
cook
damn well
really
better
at
have been
all. Like I
free.
could. It was free. And I can't remember. I remember getting it in the mail and being excited because at that time, I had very few cookbooks, and I could kind of like find my way around making like noodles and things, but I really couldn't cook yet. And I got this free recipe book, which had this recipe for this. I hope my grandma's listening now, for this African pumpkin soup. And I thought it was a wonderful uh, step into a new culinary endeavor. And what it really was a step into some kind of horrid, disgusting slop. And I'll never forget cooking it. And like basically, I put every ingredient in it in the apartment. And I remember how bad it smelled. I mean, it had peanut butter in it, it had pumpkin, it had raisins in it, it had cinnamon, it had chicken broth, it had tomatoes. It was so disgusting. And I remember that afterwards.
Okay. Now it's time for me to chime in. People who are listening, and I know there's more of you now than there was, listen to me. Every single word that she is saying should be amplified by 10 as to how demonic this thing was. And guys, if you've ever been a newly married husband, you know to watch every goddamn step you make with what you say. But there was nothing I could do to save this. It looked like hell broth with a side of I don't know what. Put the kids to bed. It was fucking horrendous. It was scary. It was a pot of scary. That's what it was. And every fiber in my body was clamoring to say, no, honey, it's okay, because this was at the point, and in all seriousness, hon, this is when you were like, hey, can you show me how to how to clean up a fish, you know, how to take a knife, how to work with fish, you know, so you had this interest. But man, and to date, you've never equaled this, thank God. It was scary. It was really, really scary. And didn't your grandma at one point say, like, oh, what are you doing, you screwball? He knows how to cook, let him.
Well, she did. She just started laughing at me when I told her, excuse me, I'm yawning. I'm sorry. This was not expected and I'm tired. She started laughing at me when I told her what I put in this pot and made. And I mean, she was pretty straightforward and didn't really give into, you know, this humor a lot. And she just was laughing at the idea that I put these things together and thought they would taste good. And I'll never forget it. And I just remember calling her and her getting hysterical on the phone that I would have put those things together and tried to feed them to another human being. But anyhow, when you say when did I first, what's that, hon?
No, go ahead.
When you were asking me, you said, when did I first realize that, what was your original question when we got into the pumpkin soup? When did I first realize?
When did you first realize that food was more than just something you make because, that it was, that it had substance, that it had soul, that it had spirit, that it was art? You know, when did that hit you?
Well, and this is very sentimental, because I think as you're asking me that question, and I never really gave it a lot of thought. But I think even though growing up, you know, I have a lot of fond memories of different foods and times with my parents, you know, and how food correlated with special times with my parents or with my grandmother, or, you know, things like that. I think actually, if I spontaneously say when did food begin to have meaning to me, is really when I met you. Because it was with you that we would, and this is just like going to make me, you know, tear up, but we would walk downtown in the freezing cold and go in that little Chinese restaurant that we so adored. And that's where I realized like it was beautiful to be in that place with those people that made that food. And only you know how special that was because you were there. And I realized like, wow, somebody could make something that you could share with another person that could feel this good. And then as we continued to date and realizing when you introduced me to eating sushi, I remember feeling like this is some beautiful freaking food. Like this is gorgeous food to eat. And I don't think I ever consciously thought of it that way until you asked me that. But I remember having a directly correlating feeling to how I felt about you. And as my feelings and love continued to grow for you, so did my feelings and love for food. And in our apartment that we shared, we often talk about that stupid box dinner we made one day that we bought this like chicken and dumpling box dinner that was like full of garbage ingredients, but we ate it, we'll never forget, on this cold, rainy night in our loft apartment. And to this day, that memory resonates with us. And we want to like replicate it in a weird way by buying a stupid box dinner again. Because in that moment, I realized that, wow, having food with another person that creates and conjures up a feeling in another person and with another person is an awesome freaking feeling. And I think it was all these experiences with you that made me really feel like, wow, I want to do food in a big way. Like I want to make it look pretty. I want to make it taste pretty. I want to have it be shared in a pretty way. And I think it was all because of you.
Yeah. Now, before people start messaging and emailing me that, oh, you staged this shit, nothing could be farther from the truth. And I'm sitting here, like, I'm sure my wife is laying there, but at the very core of it, that's what food does. That's what food should do. And that's quote stupid, because I don't think it's stupid at all. That box dinner, I can tell you the place, I can tell you the shape of the table, the smell, every detail centered around it. And didn't we run into that same box a couple of weeks ago? Wasn't it?
We saw something like it, and it's so far off what we would normally eat like today, like anymore. But we wanted to get it because we were like, I remember that night. I remember it was a very cold, like dank, wet night. And we were in our apartment, and I was just learning how to cook, and you encouraged me at that time to get that and make it. And I remember you just going on and on about how good it was and how comforting it was. And I agree it was, and partly because it had like 50,000 milligrams of sodium in it. But it was really good and really comforting at that time because it was something that I had made for us on that cold, rainy night. And so like we have in our mind that we want to recreate that feeling. Not that the meal was like spectacular, because really it wasn't. It was the feeling is what it was.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't think anything can be farther from the truth. And I don't mean to, usually by this point I'm ramping up the enthusiasm, but sitting here and reflecting on that, it's interesting to know something and then to hear it. And what's more, to hear it from somebody who you're just insanely intimately familiar with, but to hear you put it in that way literally takes me back to that moment. And that's what, if you have somebody in your life, this is to anybody listening, you have somebody in your life who is making something for you or is even trying to make something for you, God, take the time to appreciate that, because that's about the sincerest form of love. Because you can say words and you can buy things, but I think it takes that much more to create something for the nourishment of the body and the soul. And whether or not it was sodium laden or not, I think is of little matter. What mattered was, you were taking that step forward, and now you've become the culinary force to be reckoned with that you are. So I mean, we could stew in nostalgia pond all evening, for sure. But let's take it a step forward and let's look at current day culinary trends, culinary state of the union. What do you think coming up, or currently upcoming, is like the next big trend in food? About 10 years ago, microbrewers really hit the ground running, and they were strong, and now pairing food with beer has become a huge thing. What do you think the next big thing food wise is going to be?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know what it'll be, and I don't want to make predictions because I really don't know. And unlike many of your guests on this show, I don't make a living doing food. I just like to do it for fun. So one of the things that I hope that the next decade, for instance, will bring with food is an approach that somehow, and I know this seems totally maybe like unattainable, but I think the way we handle food as a society is backwards, because when you go to the grocery store to buy produce or to buy protein or meat of some sort, it is cheaper to buy the produce that has tons of chemicals on it, and cheaper to buy the protein that has been injected or treated with different things. So what I'm hoping the trend will be, because we often hear about, when we go out to eat or you read in food journals or whatever about sustainable fish and sustainable, farms and things like that. And that's wonderful. And what my hope is that will come full circle to help the agricultural world and businesses to provide healthier produce with less pesticides and less chemicals at a more reasonable cost. And that's what I hope the trend we see coming is, because right now it is very expensive to buy organic food. And like today I bought 4 ounces of or was it 8 ounces? Maybe it was 8 ounces of blueberries. They were organic, and it was $5. And the non-organic ones were $2.50 or $3 or something. Well, wow, that for many people that's not attainable. I mean, even second guessed it a couple times while I was there. Like, I stood there and had this conscious decision in my mind, like, should I do this? Should I not? And I'm really hoping that, there's a lot of sustainable farms in our area now. Todd Hopkins has told us about that new restaurant that's going to open downtown with all locally grown food, from a local farm, and lots of sustainable crops that are not genetically modified at all. But I'm really hoping that the next trend is that sort of overtakes the way everybody looks at food, and doesn't just make it that organic is for people that can afford it, because everybody should be eating that way. Right. And a lot of people do. A lot of people grow their own food, and don't put anything on it, but I'm hoping that that'll take hold for all people.
Yeah, that's a solid answer. And for a long time, the organic movement has been there, and recently, unfortunately, I think it was episode 5. My buddy from high school turned chef de cuisine out of the Bull Valley Roadhouse out in Napa, Matt Brown. He's very, very, very up on farm to table as a concept, and I'm hoping, much like you are, that farm to table really takes hold, and basically through supply and demand, the produce gets cheaper and the pesticides get more expensive, and I think that would be beyond ideal. So no, I'm obviously we agree because we're under the same roof and we're not 2 rooms away from each other, so it's still creeping me out 30 minutes in. So just in case anyone's keeping score, it's still a little wacky. So on the converse of that coin, and we talk about shit like this all the time. We bash on people for it, but if there's a trend currently in food or drink or both that really annoys the hell out of you, what would you like to see go away quickly?
A trend that annoys me. I don't think I have one. Let me think about, one thing I hate, and this isn't a trend, it's just something I hate. I hate when people put walnuts in stuff that's not like baked goods. Like I don't like walnuts personally in anything. I hate when people put nuts in food that's not meant to have nuts in it. Walnuts in a salad drives me ape shit crazy, and I recognize that the flavors together are probably really good, and my taste buds are a little skewed here because I do not care for walnuts, but I can't stand when there's walnuts in shit that it shouldn't be in. I don't like when pecans are okay in a salad. I actually do like them, but I don't like nuts and stuff that they shouldn't be in. And that's not even a trend. That's just me not liking walnuts in a salad is what it comes down to, and I'm lumping everything into it because it pisses me off.
Fair enough. You're very hateful against walnuts. I've noticed this over the years. So, but I think one thing, speaking of that to an extent that you've agreed on, is over garnishing for the sake of garnishing, and I don't think we've seen that a lot lately, but I know for a while everybody was basically, how high can we stack our plate? How much of a douchebag can we look like making the Leaning Tower of overpriced food?
Yeah.
I remember that pissing you off to a pretty decent extent.
Well, yeah, you're right. And it bothers me when you go somewhere and if you want to get a hamburger or a cheeseburger, they put on this limp ass lame lettuce and this pink tomato, and I'm thinking to myself, don't even bother. Don't even put that on my plate. It is insulting. That's an annoying thing. And that's not a trend. That's just people who don't know how to get fresh produce because it's January. Then find something else, get creative, but I don't want your freaking weak ass white lettuce and pink tomato. But that's not really a trend.
Weak ass white lettuce. You heard it here first. Weak ass. I'm typing this down so I don't forget it. Weak ass white lettuce. You heard that. You heard that here first. So there's where you came from. There's where you're at. Last section, the afters, the out of the box, and I feel like I'm cheating on the test. I know the answers to these, but it kind of excites me in a weird, silly way to hear them actually come from you. So be prepared to step out of the box a little bit, because here we go. So I'm standing in your kitchen, which would technically be our kitchen, but go ahead. So we're at home. You pick. What music or sounds do I hear in your kitchen?
Oh, boy. Well, as you very well know, it really depends on my mood. It depends on the weather. It depends on what kind of day I had at work. But one of the things I love to listen to while I'm cooking is mid to late 70s era, which includes Ambrosia, Steely Dan. I like to throw some Stevie Wonder in there as well. if I'm getting ready for like, and not that I've done this anytime recently, but if I were having a romantic dinner, I would play some Nora Jones, John Mayer. But I also, as you know, love some country. So sometimes if I'm like, feeling pretty happy and, upbeat, country is a great thing to add to that vibe as well.
Right on. Right on. So, how's your mouth in the kitchen? If we went by the movie rating systems, G, PG, PG-13, straight R, what do you got?
I would say most of the time it's probably PG-13. What do you think? I would say there are some R moments, but not like yours. Like you have a lot of R moments where I don't feel that way. I would say I'm mostly PG-13. I recognize many chefs are known for their choice vocabulary while cooking. And for me, it doesn't come out in vocabulary, it just comes out in focus. I don't, I don't like to be interrupted. I don't like to talk a lot when I'm in the middle of trying to put something together. There's less profanity than there is focus.
Well, I mean, that's true. That's true. And we are a bit different in intensity. But again, this interview isn't about me, Mrs. Rosler. It's about you. So there is that. And I completely own it. And you know what? Maybe someday I'll let you take this headset and I'll get on the iPad on the couch and we can do it in reverse that way. But now, secondary to that question, what's your favorite expletive in the kitchen? I know what it is. I want to hear you admit it.
Mother bitch, you mean?
Mother bitch. Yes. Yes. It is honestly, you'd swear English was your second language by your like ill-prepared cursing skills. I can rattle off 5 in a row that go together and could offend like the most thick-skinned. Mother bitch to me makes me laugh hysterically. It's such a point of frustration when you drop that. And it's so out of character for you. I love it. I love it. And it's that focus. And it's just this, I don't even have time to compose a proper curse word. So I'm going to throw 2 things together and see what happens. Like weak ass white lettuce. I mean, I don't know. So good. I'm glad. I'm sure you feel better for having admitted that. So I'm glad I could help you there.
Well, I mean, I actually forgot about that. That only comes out at certain moments while I'm cooking, I guess. But it's such a, it just feels good to say it when something isn't working or when you drop something or whatever and you just go, mother bitch. And it just feels so good to say it. It's like 2 words that just really help you get it out. It's like something you always wanted to say together, but you know you shouldn't. And since you're directing it at a pot of pasta, it's okay.
See, I have no problems being verbally aggressive against inanimate objects. You know this. So, and it's, yes. I'm sure our 3 children will soon learn. But anyway. All right. So here it is. You're going to be stranded on a deserted island, and you're only allowed to take 3 foods or food items with you. What would they be and why?
Oh, man. 3 food or food items. Is this giving any credence to how I feel after I eat them? Or is it just like you know what I mean? Does it matter if they make me not feel good? Am I going to be able to be rescued and get Tums or no?
No, let's just say you're completely immune to any food-based reactions. Go.
Okay. If I could only take 3 foods, I would take eggs. Well, I would take eggs and I'm going to combine this. I would take omelets, okay? And realizing I can't take an omelet somewhere, like a good one. But I would take an omelet just like you make them for me with just American cheese in them, and brown butter that turns the edges all brown and crispy. That's one. Let me think about this. I would definitely take pizza. I would definitely take pizza. If you were to ask me what type of pizza, I'm not sure. I'd really have to think about that, but I definitely need some kind of pizza in my life if I can only have 3 foods. Does wine count as food?
Wine counts as food. I forget who it was that said they were going to bring champagne with them. I think Chef Dakota Weiss on the first episode said champagne. So you're entitled.
Okay. I think my third would be a bottle of Smoking Loon Old Vine Zin. And yeah, that's that. That's what I would take.
Awesome. I think that's a pretty solid list, if I had to say so. So, next to last question, and I don't even need to ask the intro to this because I know you know who Melanie Dunea is, and I know you know what my Last Supper is. So, without further ado, what would yours be? Who would be there? What would be playing? What would be drank? What would be ate?
I think, that's such a good question. And for the multitude of times that you and I have looked through those books and thought about it, it eludes me right now. I think one of my fondest food memories I will have with me for the rest of my life is the time that you and and I'm going somewhere with this, the time that you and I were in Puerto Vallarta, and we were in that little, it was like a bar, but I don't know what it was, a bar, restaurant, whatever, and we were sitting at a high top table, and they brought out ceviche, which was out of this world. And it was the first time I had ever had ceviche. And I remember that day and that atmosphere and those flavors so well. And seeing the ocean, and just like when you have a moment like that and you feel the whole world around you because it's not your normal world. I think if I were to have a Last Supper, I think it would be in some setting very similar to that, near the water. And I think I would want just, this gets into a whole psycho-spiritual thing. Like I can't know, but I think I would just want you and our 3 children there with me. I think introducing parents and all of that gets too complex and loses some of the joy. But I think just you and our 3 children and that ceviche, and I would want some really good cheeses. Even though it doesn't go with ceviche, I would want some, what's that kind of cheese I love? The kind with the green marbling in it. Sage
Derby.
Sage Derby. I would want some of that, and I would want some really, really good Port Salut cheese and grapes, and for you to make scallops. And I realize with ceviche I probably already had scallops, but I still would want scallops the way you make them, with the butter, and sometimes you put champagne in the pan and lemon. And I think I would want to be playing all the music I just described, the Stevie Wonder, Steely Dan, Ambrosia, Journey, all my favorite type of music. But that's such a hard question because I should have thought about it more first, but I think I would want that environment, not that I need to be in Mexico, but that environment where you feel like you're a part of the whole world and yet you're so small, you're insignificant to it. And that's how I felt in that moment at Puerto
I
Vallarta,
remember
and that's how I
exactly.
would want my Last Supper to feel. Like, I'm sure you do. Like, I remember feeling that because it's a good feeling and it gives you this sense of relief. Like, there's so much more to this world and everything than me. And so if it were my Last Supper, I'd want to feel that. And I actually probably, what I ate would be far less important than how I felt because of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of that question.
Yeah, but does it really, or does that sincerely answer it? You know, it's a
And then I can tell you what I would
just
want to eat for dessert. Let me just tell you because I didn't tell you that. I would want to have some Rafino Chianti and a piece of Dark Side of the Moon chocolate cake together.
I don't think it gets much better than that. Dark chocolate and red wine. Pairing made in heaven.
It's the best.
And finally, the last question I close them all with. What is food to you in a single word?
In a single word, food is Oh, that's a hard question. In a single word, food is What are some other words people said?
I'm not giving you that.
In a single word, food would be I'm trying to think of a word that's not like cliche because there's a lot of, semi-cliche words that come to mind right off the bat that really feel real and true. But I think in a single word, food is food. I don't have a word. Food is well, this is very anticlimactic. I think in a single word, food is it's like I'm trying to think of the word to describe it. I don't want to say it's like change, but it's like it can be whatever you want it to be. Sometimes it's. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Sometimes it is what you're trying to do to show love. Sometimes it's what you're trying to do to be healthy. Food is like your core. Because even people who say, I don't live to eat, I eat to live. Well, then you're living to eat what you're eating just for sustenance. So, it can be what is keeping you healthy. It can be what you cherish that you know is not healthy. It can be what makes you feel better. It can be what you're struggling with. It's sort of like this.
So to you, food is the core.
It is. It's like and for me, I've always loved food. And, sometimes it gets in your head and you struggle with it because, especially as someone who always is trying to be healthy and struggling with the lust for funnel cakes and wine or whatever, it's hard to balance those things. But I'm sure after I get off of this podcast with you, I will think of a word. But it's like it's your entirety. To me, it's sort of what you do socially. It's what you do with your family. It's like your entirety. It's everything you're doing is surrounding it. For me, anyhow. And then I love that. Yeah, it's very encompassing. Yeah. But I don't know. There's another word I'm trying to come up with, and I can't think of it. But it is really awesome, because that's what I love about it, is you can take something and turn it into something else. And that same something can be something that helps you be healthy. It can be something that, is so decadent that you have to share it with somebody. It's just such a neat piece of art that can morph, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. I love it.
So maybe the word malleable, do you think?
No, that's not the whole word I would use. I don't know what the word I would use is, but no, not malleable. I don't know what the word is, because I feel like it's
so everybody can feel the third curtain, the curtain get pulled back. I just texted my wife with the word malleable.
I don't feel like that's what it is, though. Sorry. I
think first go around, you nailed it with core. It's at the core of everything. It's there. I think I think you got it with your first shot. Core.
Yeah, I think core sounds right. But I think there's probably other words I'm not thinking of, but it is. I mean, I talk about it all day. I talk about what I'm going to eat for lunch all day. I talk about what are we going to eat for dinner all day. I talk about what did I eat that went against my, health-related or dietary goals. And we talk about these things, and it's at the center of everything. And because we enjoy food so much, rarely do we make something that's just so that we have sustenance. Because we want to have sustenance, and then we want to have something that's memorable on top of that. So food is a memory. It's that's one word I would use for it. But there's so many words, it's really hard to say.
Well, hey, if you think of any others, just roll over in bed and tell me, okay?
Okay.
Well, at this point, I usually ask if there's anything that you need for me to plug for you, but since, like you said, you don't do this for a living, not really plugging anything. So I'll just take that little extra time and just overly thank my guest again this evening, Greta Rosler, my wife, my fellow foodie, my culinary counterpart, and really one of the biggest inspirations behind this podcast. So I told you I was going to reserve episode 8 for you, and sure enough I did. So again, I love you and thank you so much. Folks, this has been episode number 8 of the Coarse Grind Podcast. My producer, the Reverend Johnny Lamoria, John L. Robinson, Pleasure Saucer Podcast, again and again and again, my guest, Greta Rosler. Thank you so much, honey.
Thank you, honey. I love you.
I love you too. And this has been your host, Sean Rosler. Next episode, number 9, forthcoming shortly with the amazing, the astounding chef, Nikki Cascone-Grossman from Top Chef. Be sure to tune in, stay tuned, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.